Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We're now joined by Francis O'Grady, the General Secretary of the TUC, and by Mark Littlewood of the free market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs, which has been arguing for lower taxes and fewer regulations for decades. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Mark. I mean, bit odd, isn't it? The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the man in charge of the money, saying we don't need an impact assessment because we have no need for it because we know about the benefits of this deal. They're self-evident.
Well, I think the problem there is if you believe that there is some objective truth out there and a bunch of civil servants and economists, however well-meaning, can give you the absolute hard facts of exactly what GDP will be.
Well, they might give you a range of numbers to deal with.
Well, I mean, I'd allow civil society to have those sort of arguments. I think we've been arguing for 3.5 years about whether this is going to work or not, and sincere people of good faith take very different views on it. There's no objective truth out there.
But sincere people of good faith who run businesses also want some degree of certainty. So
Sure.
a couple of numbers out there concocted by people who've got the research available would be helpful, wouldn't it?
I'm not sure how much it would help businesses. What they want to know is what sort of rules and regulations they're going to face in the short term, the medium term and the long term. And it's only really the short term that you can guide them on. We don't know what government will be under in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time.
That is a fair point, isn't it, though? Because we don't even know what kind of trading relationship we're going to fashion with the European Union. So any assessment done today will be, irrelevant or outdated by, sometime next year.
Well, this matters. This matters to people's jobs, their livelihoods and their rights at work. And the nearest assessment we've got from the government's own advice is that a free trade agreement would shrink the economy by up to 6%. That means manufacturing would take a hit, jobs and livelihoods and wages would take a hit. And of course, we also know that the government wants to abandon any notion of a level playing field on workers' rights. And that's about, I'm afraid, a license to rip up workers' rights.
That is a fair point, isn't it? I mean, big businesses, like the businesses that you represent...
I don't represent any businesses.
But you're paid for by businesses, aren't you?
Well, we're paid for mainly by individual donors, actually.
And they have a lot to benefit from the kind of lack of regulation that you like to see as a result of this change in
listen, you might be of the view that the European Union is a regulatory nirvana, that it has perfectly calibrated every single rule in the interest of the British economy. Or you might take the view, and this would be my approach to it, let's look at the rule book. I mean, we don't automatically have to abandon any of these rules by leaving. Brexit is neutral on that point. The question is, I think we should methodically go through them and say, are they fit for purpose? And I think it would be a strange conclusion if we actually decided that every jot, dot and comma of EU regulation we're inheriting is perfect.
I asked Michael Gove last Thursday, we asked whether he would guarantee that workers' rights would keep pace in Britain. He was not prepared to give us that guarantee.
But that's a question for a general election.
I asked him, well, I'm afraid there are people wondering what's going to happen to their parental leave, to their rights to consultation on TUPE and redundancy, unfair dismissal. We want to know if that level playing field is guaranteed, legally binding.
And you will hold this government to account at the polls.
Well, we will hold them to account now because this matters for people's livelihoods.
Sure, and that's a matter for
talking about it
debate.
In abstract, I'm afraid, just doesn't cut the ice.
It should be discussed between the political parties. People
well,
have different views on what those rights should be.
But we're very sure that this is a bad deal for working people, and MPs should vote against it.
OK, but just to be clear, Mark, you want to see as little regulation as possible. You want, therefore, you don't like...
Less. I'm not sure I'd say as little as possible. I wouldn't burn the entire rule book.
And who are you... I mean, who would benefit from this? And are any of the people who would benefit from this pouring money into your organisation?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, that's not why we argue for lower regulations. We're sincere free market liberals. I mean, I'll give you an example. I think a lot of the rules around financial services, whilst well-intentioned, actually benefit the incumbents rather too much. It's rather difficult for new challenger businesses to actually tackle and challenge the long-standing rich incumbents.
So just for reasons for clarity here and transparency, who actually backs your think tank?
We have about £2.5 million a year. We get about 23% of that from FTSE 350 companies, the overwhelming bulk from individual donors, donations anywhere from 10 quid up to £100,000.
Care to name any individual donors?
No, well, we respect their right to privacy. Some of them are listed in our publications. I mean, we had events sponsored at some of the party conferences and their names were
let's fan out to the bigger picture. What is your vision for the future of Britain after this Brexit deal?
Well, I would like us to move slowly but surely to a lower tax, less regulated economy. And that will be a domestic political debate. I think Francis would prefer taxes and spending to go up, wishes to keep regulation in place, probably wants tighter regulations. And it's legitimate for people to argue about that in political discourse, and the ballot box at general elections will determine who prevails on a 5-yearly basis.
This is about a deal for generations of workers ahead, and so I think it's only right that, yes, we respect the result, but we should also respect the people and let them have the final say on this deal, because it's our lives and our children's lives who will be affected. And I'm afraid the way it currently looks, it looks like workers will pay the price.
So, but will they pay the price? I mean, if this deal generates more investment, generates more business, therefore generates more jobs, there's nothing to say that those jobs will necessarily be bad jobs.
The Leave campaign promised us frictionless trade with what is our nearest and biggest single market. Clearly, as we've heard tonight, even the DUP now saying we've got a border down Ireland, never mind anywhere else, that's going to make trade slower and more expensive, and that hits jobs, especially
that is true, isn't it? It's all about getting less red tape, and that's what you want to see. We're going to have more red tape between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. We're going to get an awful lot of tape from the EU with all these goods that come in, and businesses will have to prove that those goods aren't going to end up in the single market.
That's true. And I'm not claiming that this deal is perfect. It's far from perfect. It's a question of trade-offs and balances here. Yes, solving what we do around Northern Ireland is extremely difficult. The question is whether you have confidence that in the years ahead, not just in the days ahead, British governments will legislate more sensibly than the European Union does. And I am confident in that regard.
I think this
is a leap of faith which many people aren't prepared to take.
Incredibly
it's a leap of faith either way.
This is about a deal with Trump, who has got his eyes on the NHS and our public services. Big Pharma funds him. We know exactly where his interests are.
Got to leave it there. Francis O'Grady, Mark Littlewood, thanks very much indeed.